Hello, everybody. It's April 17th, 2020, and here's your, I say, 3 times weekly coronavirus update. So let's look at case fatalities again. Hopefully by now you are familiar with case fatalities, the probability of dying if you have the coronavirus. Belgium has the highest rate, followed by UK, Italy, France. Spain's going down a little bit. That's good in terms of. I think they've been lower anyway, but they're still within the red. What I call the red. Belgium's creeping up there in terms of prevalence. You'll notice how Belgium has about 198 individuals per 100,000 infected, confirmed infected. If you watched my prior videos, you'd know that testing is something that you shouldn't just take at face value. And you shouldn't do this with any disease you get tested for. Tests aren't perfect, and you need to understand their validity and reliability information before you can actually conclude for sure that you have the disease. But if you're interested in this, watch the video that I produced a couple days ago, and I talked extensively about that. I'm not going to talk about that today as much. Countries in the yellow are what I consider they're still pretty bad, but they're not quite as bad as the ones in the red. Like the US, we're at about 5% probability of dying if we're infected. And also from prior videos, you'd know that, and just from watching the news, that the majority of those deaths are in New York, New Jersey, and then also Michigan. Those are 3 heavily hit areas. So this is something to keep in mind. Hopefully we will not climb into the red here. This is where being in the red is not good here. Well, I think, what is it, being in the, well, it's just like business. Being in the red is not good. I think being in the black is good in business. I'm not a business person. And so all the countries here have case fatalities rates less than 10, all the way down to 2. Luxembourg, although Luxembourg has this ginormous prevalence per 100,000, their case fatality is quite low. So that says something about how they're treating those who are most at risk. And down here, countries, Kuwait, that are quite wealthy have an advantage too. And I think they're also they probably have plenty of hospital beds per 100,000. The average, so in terms of case fatality, you could use either the average or the median. Usually I'll go towards the median when we have highly skewed values. That means they're skewed in one direction. Like for instance, in terms of prevalence, it's high, very, very high in Luxembourg, right? 450.9. So that's pushing the distribution to the right. If you know anything about statistical distributions, the normal distribution is the most famous of all the statistical distributions that we have. And when data are pushing it to the right, where there's some very, very high values we normally consider outliers, you can't use them as outliers here because these are true countries. You have a tendency to not want to use the mean because it's overinflated, and a median is the value in the middle. So I'd say 53 is a good value for case fatality among the countries that I listed here. I think there's like 37 or so countries here. I can't do all of them. It would just take forever, and I've got millions of other things to do, people to see, and places to go. In terms of the US, this is what our growth curve looks like. It's kind of it has its ups and downs, right? So, but we're steadily increasing in terms of prevalence when we compare ourselves to Italy, which is in green. They're starting to slow down in terms of their growth. Spain is it's an interesting, these are all interesting cases. This is a real world look at what's going on with the data, and it's just amazing that we can do that. I wish we wouldn't have to do this. Believe me, I'd rather be out playing somewhere than just doing statistics, although I love doing stats, but I'd rather be doing other stuff. And South Korea is still doing better and better all the time. So I think that things do look a little rosier now than they did. As long as we behave appropriately, we'll be okay. What that means is wearing masks so you protect others, and others wearing masks so they protect you. Kind of cancels each other out in a sense, and it helps everybody, and maintaining your social distancing. So let's look at this idea of beds, hospital beds per 1,000. If you're familiar with my videos, I talk about this all the time. This gray line here is case fatality. So in these countries such as Belgium, the case fatality is high. And look at the gap here between the proportion of the population above 64 and hospital beds. Where you see this big gap, you also tend to see more deaths. As that gap shrinks, or is at least, there may be a gap, but there's a matching in intensity, like say in Germany, where it seems like in Monaco, where you seem to have higher number of hospital beds per 1,000 individuals in relation to the proportion of the population that's 65 or above, you have lower case fatality. This yellowish line here is the population density. That's number of individuals per square kilometer. And I created this HB65 index by dividing the number of hospital beds per 1,000 by the proportion of the population above 64, 65 or above. And I plotted it here against the case fatality, and look at that line. I mean, shows a pretty nice relation between the two. Of course, you can't just trust a figure. Figures can be manipulated in ways to ensure that these differences look good. There's unscrupulous people out there. So what we do is we do regression analyses to test these out. This is a regression analysis conducted in SPSS using this Hayes process macro. This is an addition to a computer program, and I'm looking at the effects of several predictor variables on our outcome variable, which is case fatality, which I had to log transform because the distribution of residuals, you're like, what the heck is he talking about? But if you know statistics, the distribution of the residuals at different values of your predictor cannot be heterogeneous. They must be homogeneous. And so I had to log transform that. And if you look at what are significant predictors, and you'll notice I did control for population density. I also control population density. I also included hospitals per 1,000 and the proportion of population 65 and above. And I also did this interaction between the density, population density, and the proportion of the population greater than or equal to 65, which was not significant. Again, you'd have to understand what statistics are and how statistics work in order to understand what I'm looking at here. But what I'm talking about, otherwise you have to take my word for it. But here are the data, so you can always consult the statistician if you think I'm making stuff up. So here we have that the greater the number of hospitals per 1,000, you have a significant relation with significant and negative relation, so that what we're seeing in those figures seems to make statistical sense. So the greater the number of hospitals per 1,000, the lower the population density. Also, the greater the number of the greater the proportion of the population 65 and above, the greater the case fatality rate. So those all make sense based on those figures that I showed. The interaction was not significant. Boo, 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 boo. And here I also did another interaction. I didn't use the macro here because it was just a straight out interaction for that figure, the blue figure that we had, where we're looking at the HB65 index in relation to case fatality. And here's our regression model here. So this is controlling for population density, just like the figure. And we have a significant, here's that p-value, it's less than whatever. It's actually less than 0.001. So there's a significant and negative relation, just like we saw in the figure, between the HB65 and case fatality. So what's the bottom line here? Well, we're starting to understand why people are dying and why they're not in certain countries. Like Taiwan is doing an amazing job. They actually tackled this problem very early. That's one thing. But look at, they also have this very nice ratio of hospital beds to population greater than or equal to 65. That's something that we need to do better at here in the United States. We're kind of somewhere like in the little bit more towards the yikes part of this figure, this graph. So we need to do a better job there. And certain countries really, really, really need to do a better job, like Belgium, Italy, UK. I'm not really sure what that says. I think, does it say that we're not just spending enough on hospital beds or in hospitals, or we're not as equipped to take care of the elderly? But that's it for right now, and I hope everybody stays safe, wear masks, maintain social distancing, wash your hands. You don't need hand sanitizer if you don't, I mean, use soap, water, wash your hands 20 seconds at least with nice, warm, towards the hot end water. Thank you very much, and have a good and safe day.